Hello and welcome to SEDA Online. I'm Jane. I'm really happy you're here. It's great that you're available and that you're listening to my presentation again today. So today my topic is tips for pronunciation. So I'm just thinking about the people that I know who are non-native speakers of English and thinking like how overall could I help them to improve their pronunciation. So I've come up with 5 tips that I hope might be useful for you and for a lot of people in our school. The first tip is to remember that English is a stress-timed language. A stress-timed language as opposed to a syllable-timed language. The second thing is to remember the schwa, the sound in English. The third thing is to be careful with the pronunciation of your consonants, not to insert extra vowel sounds and to think about not pronouncing double consonants and focusing on your ED endings. So we'll just go through these tips one by one so that I can explain to you what it is that I mean. Before I start, I'd just like to let you know that my main reference for this presentation is this book by Michael Swan called Learner English. It's widely acclaimed as the authority on pronunciation from different language groups. So my first point is to remember that English is a stress-timed language. And so what is a stress-timed language? Well, we have quite a few different ones. English is a stress-timed language. Arabic, Russian, Dutch, Norwegian and German. They're all stress-timed languages. And this is different from syllable-timed, which is Brazilian Portuguese, Spanish, Italian, Finnish, Icelandic, Chinese and French. So Swan says that European Portuguese is actually stress-timed, which is interesting for you maybe to know that even though it's one language, the European version is working more on being stress-timed, whereas the Brazilian version is more syllable-timed, which is then more similar to Spanish. So I just want to give you 3 sentences. The first one is dogs chase cats. The second one is the dogs chase the cats. And the third one is the dogs will be chasing the cats. And I want to make the point that when I read these 3 sentences, they sound very similar and they take more or less the same amount of time to say. Dogs chase cats, the dogs chase the cats, the dogs will be chasing the cats. So I hope you can hear the rhythm there, that it's like dogs chase cats, dogs chase cats, the dogs will chase the cats, dogs chase the cats, dogs chase cats. It's very, very similar in speed. And that's because with the stress-timed language means that we stress the words that have content, the words that mean something. So you need to know we're talking about dogs, we're talking about cats, and the verb we're talking about is chasing. Dogs chase cats, the dogs chase the cats, the dogs will be chasing the cats. So here we have words with strong forms that are important in stress, like dogs, chase, and cats, and weak forms that are not important. So chasing, will be, those words are not really important. So the dogs will be chasing the cats. It's the content is still there, and the grammar you understand just because you follow what's being said. So like when we're speaking, we adapt our pronunciation according to the audience. So if we can see that they understand what we're saying, then we just keep going. And if we feel that there's a communication breakdown, then we have to, what we call, repair the communication, like fix it, re-explain it, and then keep going. So that's how the language works. And it works for maximum efficiency, as in speed and getting your message across, rather than trying to be so beautifully grammatically accurate. So like if you're new to English, and especially if you come from a syllable-stressed language, you might have this feeling that you need to say every word and you need to say it correctly. But actually in English that's not the case. you just need to say the content words, and then you just need to glug everything else together. So like some syllables will be longer, will be stressed, and some will be shorter, and that's just the way it works. That's not the way it would be in a syllable time language like Spanish or Portuguese or Chinese, where you have to say every syllable. But if you try and say every syllable in English, it sounds very forced, very boring, very slow, and it's difficult for a native speaker to listen to it, because they're just like, come on, give me the content. I want to understand what you're saying. I don't really care about these grammar words. So our ears and our brains, they go straight to the words, the content words, and that's the way they know what it is you're talking about. So let me give you some examples of like weak forms and strong forms, where we sort of swallow the words that we're not using, like conjugations, pronouns, prepositions, auxiliaries, articles. They're often lost because we don't think that they're important. And then, especially for people whose language is syllable timed, they don't understand why we haven't put these words in. So, for example, and. So you can say, we say fish and chips, and I like it's often even written like that, fish and chips, but it's obviously fish and chips, but fish and chips is what we say. A chair and a table, a chair and a table, chair and a table, chair and a table, chair and a table. We don't need to say and. Then can, there's a strong form and a weak form of can. So she can speak better. She can speak Spanish better than I can. She can speak Spanish better than I can. She can speak better Spanish than I can. Because like we know that we're repeating the can verb, so therefore we only really need to say it properly once. So she can speak Spanish better than I can. We can hear that you're saying it twice. Just say it once. We know what the verb is. Otherwise, just say it as quickly as you can. And the point is that she can do it better than me. So she can speak Spanish better than I can. She, Spanish, I can. She, I can. She, I can. She, better than I can. Better than I can. She, better than I can. She can speak Spanish better than I can. Yeah. And then a pint of beer, beer. And that's the last of the wine. That's the last of the wine. That's the last of the wine. The wine. So that's last of the wine. That's what's important, the last of the wine. It's not the last of the wine. Have you finished? Have you finished? Have you finished? Have you finished? Yes, I have. Because you can't say yes, I've. Yes, I have. Yes, I have. I have finished. Have you finished? Have you finished? Yes, I have. One of them's weak. Have you finished? The other one's strong. Yes, I have. And then you should have told me. You should have told me. And maybe this is why these should and could and would sentences are so difficult for non-native speakers of English to learn, because when we speak them, we hardly say them. We say you should have. You should have. What does that mean? You should have. It should have, but we put them weak because you should have told me. The point is that there's a problem about telling. So telling is the main verb. You tell me. You should have told me. You should have told me. Told past tense, and the should have is in a weak form. So stressing, and what's important for you to remember is that if you stress words wrongly, you're actually, well, if you stress words like in a non-standard way, in a non-normal way, you're actually putting a new meaning. Like, you should have told me means that it's your fault. You should have told me. So if you say, you should have told me, it sounds sort of cross, because like normally it should be, you should have told me, because like I care about being told, instead of like, you should have told me. Then it sounds like I'm angry, that I'm being very definitive about what I'm saying. So you need to be really, really careful about stressing words. And being mindful of the fact that this is where sort of intercultural communication really becomes at play, because people don't like the stress timing and the way you use intonation is is very, it's not really defined, you know, and people just get a feeling from you and they don't know why. And if you use your language wrongly and you stress the wrong words, people take a message from it that you never even meant to give them, because you didn't realize that you were managing your stress and your intonation in a way which sounded aggressive to them, but to you it just sounds like a syllable timed language. You know, it's pretty difficult. So like if you said, I saw them yesterday, then you're saying them, particularly them, and not somebody else. Or they were happy. It means, no, why do you think they weren't happy? It was his book, not his bag. It's like nobody ever said it wasn't his bag, you know. And so if you say it was his book, not his bag that I wanted, that sounds non-aggressive. It was his book, not his bag I wanted. It sounds like you're being impatient, that you're talking about somebody else, like why are you angry? You know, maybe you didn't mean to sound angry at all. You were just trying to stress every word like a syllable timed language. The next thing to do, which is really important, is to remember the schwa, because this is how you make a syllable timed language. So that's the symbol for the schwa, is this upside down E. And the sound of it is like the in America. So it's a sound of it's a very guttural, like sound. Some people say it's sort of like a lazy sound, like you've been punched in the stomach. So America, and that sound, which is a sort of expiring noise. It's very easy to say, very fast to say, and that's how we manage to, as you say, talk so fast, and just put our content words in and just use this schwa as a filler for all the grammar words. So it's the most common vowel sound in English, and that's the reason why there are so many spelling problems, because the actual written vowels don't follow the pronunciation when you're using the schwa. So I've just got a little tongue twister here. If two witches were watching two watches, which witch would watch which witch? Which witch would watch which watch? So that's kind of funny, isn't it? If two witches were watching two watches, which witch would watch which watch? So the were, that's the schwa. And so watching is watching. Witches were watching two watches, which witch would watch which watch? So you've got an awful lot of that sound in there. If two witches were watching two watches, which witch would watch which watch? You see, so that A sound, when you say a watch quickly, you say watch. It's slightly A, but it's mostly the schwa sound, you know. Yeah, can you say that at speed? If two witches were watching two watches, which witch would watch which watch? Can you do that? So the schwa is prevalent because English is a stress time language. Each syllable is roughly the same length, and so in a syllable time language, you have to give each syllable more or less the same length. And if you want to talk fast, then you have to get through all the syllables in a syllable timed language. But in English, no, you don't have to get through the syllables. If you consider that the syllables are not important, then you can just like roll them all through with a sound. And that's why you get these peaks in terms of meaning, in terms of the main content words of your sentence. So if in Spanish or Brazilian Portuguese you want to speak faster, you have to shove all your syllables in together as quickly as you can. Whereas in English, if you want to speed up, you just sort of rub the syllables out. Just don't say them. That's the easiest way to get through it. And then you replace the syllables that you don't say with a schwa. So here's another one, another tip for you is in the pronunciation of your consonants. So I've picked p and s and b. So Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. A peck of pickled peppers Peter Piper picked. If Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, where are the pickled peppers Peter Piper picked? So that p sound, p, is not aspirated. So p and b. If you go p like that, you can hear that the p comes out without a kind of a hit on it. Whereas if you go b, then you can feel b, p, p, b. The b, you actually close the sound in and then it explodes out of your windpipe, whereas the p just comes out gently. So Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. A peck of pickled peppers Peter Piper picked. If Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, where are the pickled peppers Peter Piper picked? So where are they? Where are the pickled peppers? So Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. A peck of pickled peppers Peter Piper picked. If Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, where are the pickled peppers Peter Piper picked? So again, like look at the soft words like of and the. Where are the pickled peppers? We just say, where are the pickled peppers that Peter Piper picked? So those words are not really important, because Peter Piper is important because that's the person who did it. Picked is important because that's the verb. And then a peck of pickled peppers is the noun. So we don't really care about and we don't really care about of. So we say a peck of pickled peppers. And we leave the weak version, a weak form of and of. A peck of pickled peppers Peter Piper picked. If Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, where are the pickled peppers Peter Piper picked? So yeah, I'm just trying to say strong and weak forms, unaspirated P sound. And now let's do it with B. So B. You can feel B is different on your windpipe. So here we've got Betty Botter. So Betty Botter bought some butter, but she said the butter's bitter. If I put it in my batter, it will make my batter bitter. But a bit of better butter will make my batter better. So it was better that Betty Botter bought a bit of better butter. Can you say that? Betty Botter is the person and she bought some butter, but she said the butter's bitter. If I put it in my batter, it will make my batter bitter. But a bit of better butter will make my batter better. So it was better that Betty Botter bought a bit of better butter. B, 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 b. You need to practice that b sound so as not to confuse it with a p sound. Yeah. And then here we have another one, which is a problem, is the s, sh, the sh and the s together. So we've got she sells seashells at the seashore. If she sells seashells at the seashore, where are the seashells that she sells at the seashore? She sells seashells at the seashore. If she sells seashells at the seashore, where are the seashells she sells at the seashore? Sh and s. It's quite difficult to make a distinction between the two, but it's kind of important, you know, because the sh is a very English sound that is maybe not so easy for other people to speak. My fourth point is not to insert extra vowel sounds and to be mindful of double consonants. So this comes back to the syllable timed language, you know. This is interesting actually. So you've got a new display and you've got a new display. And so like we think that's hilarious because a new display and a new display is different, but we say that's a new display, that's a new display. And so it sounds exactly the same, a new display, a new display. And that's because we just run the words into each other. And that's why it's difficult for you, because you're like, well, how can I possibly understand if it's a new display or a nudist play? And you can't, except for the context. Like, oh, that's a really interesting new display. Oh, that's a really interesting new display. Is that a new display or a new display? So Irish people speaking fast is like a common complaint. And then the point is that when a student sees the spoken sentence in its written form, there's no problem understanding it. So like the problem is that we run our sounds into a continuous stream without clear-cut borderlines between each word. So you can't really tell where the words finish. Is it a new display or a new display? It's not easy, is it? And so as a Portuguese speaker of English, you sort of tend to fix that by adding extra vowels that we don't put in. So a new display, maybe, or a new display, or a new play. But you can't do that in English. You can't say steam and then put a little e in there first, like esteem, or park and then say parky. You can't close off your syllables by putting an extra vowel in. It's just not what we do. You can't say a cabbie instead of a cab. You just have to run all those words together, and you just have to hope that by the context people will understand what you're saying. And the same with double consonants, is that there's a tendency from Portuguese speakers of English to put an extra sound in there, because in fact you're supposed to just say like platform, 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 and it all runs together, not platiform, which would be two syllables, plat, and then form, platform, and make a distinction between them. No, run them together, platform, platform. And clothes is another one, clothes, 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 not clothes. You're not allowed to put another vowel in there. You just have to like squash it all up together. But sometimes you run the risk of doing the opposite, is that you're forgetting a vowel sound that is actually there. Portuguese speakers often forget a vowel sound at the end of words. So instead of saying coffee, they say cough, cough. No, coffee, not cough. City, not sit. And then the last thing I wanted to say today was to focus on your ed endings. And again, I think this probably comes from people thinking about written English rather than spoken English, and they know that the past tense ending is ed, and therefore they say ed on the end of everything, like advanced. But we don't say advanced, we say advanced. So you need to remember, like, that even if the ed ending might be easy when you're writing, just put ed on everything. When you're speaking, you've actually got a choice between 3 different ed endings, d, t, and id. And if you get the wrong one, it just hurts the ear of the native speaker, it's just not correct. And the point is that id is maybe only around 1/3% of the times that people say id. Mostly we say d or t. And d and t are actually really pretty similar, so it doesn't really matter so much if you get those 2 wrong. But if you put an id on there and you add this extra vowel that we don't have, it sounds very wrong. Your pronunciation doesn't sound good. So, for example, we wrapped the Christmas presents last night. So you just need to look at these words, like what's the past tense of laugh, of finish, of kill, of help, of want, of hike, of rent, of cover, of haunt, and of hunt. Is it d, is it t, or is it id? That's your challenge now. So are you ready? Let's go. I laughed at the joke. Our work is finished. See, I laughed, I laughed, I laughed, I laughed. It's not really very different between I laughed and I laughed, but it's a t sound because it's a f and then a t. It's easier for us to say than a f and then a d. So I laughed. Our work is finished. Finished. D goes to a d. And the snake killed the mouse. The teacher helped the student. Put helped the student. When I was younger, I wanted to walk on the moon. We hiked to the top of the mountain. James rented his apartment. We can't go swimming because the pool is covered. That old house is haunted. And we hunted for her keys but couldn't find them. So that's the point. D, t, and id. You need to make sure that you get the right one. And like, do please remember, don't say that you're in the advanced class, because then you just don't sound like you should be in the advanced class. If you say advanced, it's wrong. Advanced is correct. So I've just got a little task for you now, which I really wish that you would do, even if you maybe do it after once this lesson is finished, and then you can do a catch up on it, is that I've got a little piece of a text here, and my hope is that you'll record yourself reading it, put the ed endings in that you expect, and then compare your version to mine to see if you get it right. So are you ready? This is the text. So I'm going to read it now, and then I hope that we're going to check it, going to do your own, and check if you can get the same pronunciation as me. Okay? So the bear jumped out of its cage and into the crowd. She must have realized that this was her best chance to escape. The bear's trainer looked as though he were about to faint from the terror of it all. It seemed like his worst nightmare come true. He scrambled to his feet and started waving his hands and shouting to get the bear's attention. She stopped her wild rampage only for a moment at the sound of her trainer's pleas. She quickly turned back to the crowd and then resumed knocking people to the floor. The trainer suddenly had an idea. He reached into his pocket and pulled from it a large chocolate-covered treat, a known favourite of the bear's. He shouted the bear's names once more, and she turned to face him. She saw the treat and ran at full gallop towards him. He threw the treat into the cage, and the bear followed. He locked the door behind her and fell to the floor in relief. Apparently, the bear valued food more than freedom. So what I'm trying to do there, as well as the ed endings, is I'm trying to show you that you have to choose the content words and put the stress on those words, and all the small words, the prepositions, the pronouns, the articles, they don't really matter for the meaning, and therefore you just like squash them all together and say them as quickly as you can, you know. So I'm just going to read this for you one more time, just so that you can listen, hopefully, to the rhythm of the language and hear that the loud words are the words that have content, the quiet words are the words that are grammar words, and that's how English works. And that if we're just trying to get to our content words, we just will suck everything up that's not content word, so that it's not considered to be particularly important in spoken language. So the bear jumped out of its cage and into the crowd. She must have realized that this was her best chance to escape. The bear's trainer looked as though he were about to faint from the terror of it all. It seemed like his worst nightmare had come true. He scrambled to his feet and started waving his hands and shouting to get the bear's attention. She stopped her wild rampage only for a moment at the sound of her trainer's pleas. She quickly turned back to the crowd and then resumed knocking people to the floor. The trainer suddenly had an idea. He reached into his pocket and pulled from it a large chocolate-covered treat, a known favourite of the bear's. He shouted the bear's name once more, and she turned to face him. She saw the treat and ran at full gallop towards him. He threw the treat into the cage, and the bear followed. He locked the door behind her and fell to the floor in relief. Apparently, the bear valued food more than freedom. So thank you for listening. Those were my tips. I hope this is helpful to you. See you again tomorrow. Bye.